In a quiet suburban neighborhood where manicured lawns and perfectly aligned mailboxes are the norm, lives a compassionate resident named Sarah. Sarah is the kind of person who always goes the extra mile for her neighbors, whether that means lending a cup of sugar or volunteering at local events. She's well-liked in the community, known for her warm smile and willingness to help others. However, today is different. Today, she finds herself in an unimaginable crisis. As she hurries to her mother's side, anxiety grips her heart. Her mother has been feeling unwell for days, but this morning, things took a turn for the worse. Sarah can't shake the fear that something serious might be happening. With trembling hands, she dials 911, her voice shaky as she explains the situation to the operator. Within minutes, an ambulance is dispatched, and Sarah feels a flicker of hope. Help is on the way. Time seems to stretch infinitely as she waits outside her home, pacing with worry. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood, the laughter of children playing, dogs barking, are drowned out by her racing thoughts. She glances at her phone anxiously, praying for the paramedics to arrive quickly. In her mind, all that matters is getting her mother the care she needs. When the ambulance finally pulls up to the curb, relief washes over Sarah momentarily. But that relief is short-lived as she notices a figure standing in front of the vehicle. Karen, the notorious HOA president. Known for enforcing neighborhood rules with an iron fist, Karen has always been a thorn in Sarah's side. Today, however, she stands as an obstacle in front of a lifeline. Sarah's heart sinks as she realizes what's about to unfold. The urgency of her situation clashes with Karen's overzealous adherence to HOA regulations. Little does either woman know that this confrontation will lead to an unexpected twist that neither could foresee, one that would change their lives forever. Karen Mitchell is the embodiment of the neighborhood's strictest rules and regulations, a self-appointed gatekeeper who takes her role as HOA president very seriously. Dressed in her signature pastel sweater and perfectly coiffed hair, she strides through the neighborhood with an air of authority that makes even the most confident residents think twice before stepping out of line. Her watchful eyes seem to scan for any infractions, from a lawn that's just an inch too tall to a mailbox painted in an unauthorized shade. Known for her unwavering commitment to maintaining the neighborhood's pristine image, Karen has earned a reputation that instills both fear and frustration among her neighbors. She relishes the power of her position, often reminding residents of the bylaws with a smirk that suggests she takes pleasure in enforcing them. But beneath her polished exterior lies a deeper disdain for anything she perceives as disruptive or out of place. Whether it's a child's bicycle left unattended or a festive holiday decoration deemed too gaudy, Karen is quick to pounce on any opportunity to issue warnings or penalties. On this particular day, as she stands blocking the ambulance, her expression is one of righteous indignation. To her, the presence of an emergency vehicle is not just an inconvenience but a violation of the neighborhood's tranquility. The sirens disrupt her carefully curated peace, and she feels compelled to intervene. With arms crossed and a steely gaze, she is determined to assert her authority, oblivious to the gravity of the situation unfolding before her. Her obsession with order blinds her to compassion. She cannot see beyond the rules she upholds so fiercely. As Sarah pleads with her to let the ambulance through, Karen remains unmoved, convinced that her actions are justified in preserving the integrity of their community. Little does Karen know that today's confrontation will force her to confront not just her strict adherence to rules but also the very essence of what it means to be part of a community, a lesson she never expected to learn under such dire circumstances. As Sarah clutches her phone, she feels the weight of panic settle in her chest. Her mother's condition has worsened dramatically, and every second feels like an eternity. With trembling fingers, she dials 911, her breath hitching as the operator answers. The urgency in Sarah's voice betrays her fear as she explains the situation, a sudden onset of severe symptoms that leave her mother barely able to breathe. "Please, you have to hurry. My mom is in really bad shape. I think she needs immediate medical attention." Each word tumbles out in a rush fueled by desperation. The operator remains calm, asking for details while assuring Sarah that help is on the way. Yet, despite the reassurances, a gnawing anxiety lingers in her mind. Will they arrive in time? After hanging up, Sarah races into the living room where her mother lies on the couch, pale and struggling for breath. She brushes back her mother's hair, whispering soothing words even as her heart races with dread. Time feels warped, moments stretch into what seems like hours as she anxiously glances out the window, awaiting the familiar red and white of an ambulance. When the distant sound of sirens finally pierces through the silence of the neighborhood, a flicker of hope ignites within Sarah. But that hope quickly turns to frustration as she realizes how far away the ambulance is from her home. She rushes outside to flag them down, desperate to guide them through the twists and turns of their suburban maze. As the ambulance pulls up to the curb, relief floods over her until she sees Karen standing defiantly in front of the vehicle with an expression that screams authority. The moment freezes as Sarah's heart sinks. No, not now, she thinks, feeling a wave of anger rise within her. In that critical moment, Sarah knows this is not just about getting medical help for her mother, it's about confronting an obstacle that could mean life or death. The conflict with Karen looms large as she steels herself to fight for what truly matters, a chance to save her mother before it's too late. The sound of sirens grows louder, slicing through the tension that hangs thick in the air. Sarah's heart races as she finally spots the ambulance turning the corner, its bright lights flashing against the suburban backdrop. Relief washes over her, but it's quickly overshadowed by the urgent need to get the paramedics to her mother. She rushes to the front of her house, waving her arms frantically, praying they can see her. As the ambulance comes to a halt, the doors swing open with a metallic clang. Two paramedics leap out, one grabs a stretcher while the other pulls on his gloves, their expressions serious and focused. The atmosphere is charged with urgency as they assess the situation. Time is of the essence. They move quickly but efficiently, their training kicking in as they prepare to assist. "Where is she?" one of them calls out, scanning the area for any signs of distress. Sarah gestures wildly towards her living room window, her voice trembling as she shouts back, "In here. Please hurry." The paramedics exchange a quick glance before sprinting towards the house, their boots pounding against the pavement. Sarah can feel adrenaline coursing through her veins as she follows closely behind them, her mind racing with thoughts of her mother and how crucial every moment is. She hurries inside, guiding them through the door where her mother lies. The scene shifts dramatically as the paramedics enter, their practiced movements bring a sense of calm amidst Sarah's chaos. They quickly kneel beside her mother, assessing her condition with swift precision. One paramedic asks Sarah questions about her mother's medical history while checking vital signs, while the other prepares equipment and assesses immediate needs. But just as things start to feel manageable, Sarah notices Karen standing at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed defiantly, a silent barrier between life-saving help and an unfolding emergency. The juxtaposition of frantic medical attention against Karen's rigid stance only amplifies the tension in the air. In that moment, Sarah realizes this isn't just a battle for her mother's health, it's also a clash between compassion and stubbornness in a neighborhood governed by rules rather than humanity. As the ambulance rolls to a stop, the paramedics leap into action, but their efforts are abruptly halted by a sharp voice cutting through the air. "Excuse me. You can't park there." Karen's tone is authoritative, her stance unyielding as she steps in front of the ambulance, arms crossed defiantly. The paramedics exchange bewildered glances, caught off guard by the confrontation. "Ma'am, this is an emergency. We need to get to that house immediately," one of them responds, trying to maintain professionalism while urgency hangs thick in the atmosphere. Karen raises a finger, her expression a mix of indignation and determination. "I'm sorry, but you're blocking the driveway. That's against neighborhood regulations. The HOA requires all vehicles to park in designated areas only." Her eyes narrow as if she believes she's enforcing a sacred law rather than obstructing life-saving assistance. "Lady, this is not the time for rules," another paramedic snaps, frustration creeping into his voice as he gestures toward the house where Sarah's mother lies in distress. "Your neighbor needs help right now." But Karen remains unmoved. "I understand you're trying to help, but I can't allow you to violate the HOA guidelines. It sets a precedent. If we let one ambulance park wherever it pleases, what's next? Fire trucks? Delivery vans?" Her voice rises with each point she makes, completely missing the gravity of the situation unfolding before her. Sarah stands frozen in disbelief just a few feet away, her heart pounding in her chest as she watches this absurd standoff. "Karen, my mom is sick. Just let them through," she shouts, desperation flooding her voice. But Karen only huffs in response, clearly viewing Sarah's plea as an emotional outburst rather than a legitimate concern. The tension escalates as time ticks by. The paramedics look at each other, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that they need to take action. They step forward, prepared to navigate around Karen and reach their patient, determined to prioritize life over rules if only they can get past the obstacle standing in their way. Sarah feels her heart race as the standoff escalates. The sirens still wail in the background, a haunting reminder of the urgency they're all facing. She takes a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm despite the mounting frustration. "Karen, please? My mom is inside and she needs help right now." Her voice trembles with emotion as she steps forward, desperation etched across her face. Karen's expression remains resolute, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I understand that, but rules are rules. If I let one exception slide, everyone will think they can do the same. You don't want that chaos in our neighborhood. Her tone is unwavering, as if she believes she's defending a greater good rather than obstructing a medical emergency. Chaos? Sarah nearly chokes on the word, incredulity rising within her. This isn't about chaos, this is about saving my mother's life. What good are rules if people are suffering? She takes another step closer to Karen, her eyes pleading. Just think for a moment. If it were your mother in there, would you still care about some ridiculous HOA guideline? For a brief moment, Sarah sees a flicker of uncertainty cross Karen's face, but it quickly vanishes behind a wall of stubbornness. That's not the point, Karen insists, her voice losing some of its conviction but still firm. The neighborhood has to stay orderly. I can't allow exceptions. Frustration boils over inside Sarah. How can someone be so rigid at such a crucial moment? You're not just blocking an ambulance, you're blocking help, she cries out, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Please, let them through. My mom is counting on us. As she pleads with Karen, Sarah feels the weight of her words hanging between them like a fragile thread. Every second feels agonizingly long. She glances back at the paramedics who stand ready and waiting, their expressions reflecting her own desperation. She knows that if she can't break through to Karen soon, they might run out of time. Please, she whispers softly now, hoping to reach whatever humanity might be left within this uncompromising woman. Don't let your pride take my mother away from me. Karen stands her ground, her expression a mix of defiance and self-righteousness. Even as Sarah's desperate pleas echo around her, she remains unmoved, clinging tightly to her belief that rules must prevail above all else. You don't understand how important it is to maintain order in our community, she insists, her voice steady, almost cold. If I let you bypass the rules for an emergency, then what's next? Everyone will have an excuse to disrupt the peace. The words strike Sarah like a punch to the gut. Peace? How can Karen equate her petty rules with the life of another human being? This isn't about peace. This is life and death. Sarah cries out, frustration boiling over as she gestures emphatically toward the house. My mother could be dying in there. But Karen's eyes narrow, unyielding. And what happens when someone else feels they have an emergency? We can't just throw away the rules because of one situation. Her tone drips with condescension as if Sarah's emotional state is simply a sign of weakness. You need to think about the bigger picture here, she adds, crossing her arms tighter as if fortifying her stance. Sarah can hardly believe what she's hearing. It's as if Karen is deaf to the very real crisis unfolding before them. All that matters to her is maintaining her image of authority and control within the neighborhood. The paramedics stand behind Sarah, visibly frustrated but still waiting for a breakthrough. Karen, Sarah implores, her voice softer now in an attempt to reach her. Please reconsider. This isn't just about your rules, it's about saving a life. Can't you see that? But Karen shakes her head defiantly, a disdainful smirk creeping across her face. I'm doing what's best for everyone in this neighborhood. If I allow exceptions today, it will only lead to chaos tomorrow. Her stubbornness is palpable, a wall that seems impossible to breach. Every second that ticks by feels like an eternity to Sarah as she watches helplessly. She knows that Karen's refusal to budge could cost her mother precious moments of care. The tension between them thickens, a bitter reminder that some people hold their beliefs tighter than they do their compassion. As frustration builds to a boiling point within Sarah, she realizes that she must find a way to shatter this obstinate barrier before it's too late. Just as the tension reaches a fever pitch, Sarah's phone buzzes in her pocket, cutting through the chaos. She pulls it out quickly, glancing at the screen. It's an unknown number, but she answers it anyway, hoping for any news about her mother. Hello, she answers breathlessly, still watching Karen and the paramedics. Is this Sarah? A woman's voice asks. It's unfamiliar and slightly frantic. This is Officer Daniels from the local police department. I need to inform you of something urgent. Sarah's heart races as she feels dread wash over her. What is it? Is it about my mom? No, the officer replies, hesitating for a moment before continuing. It's about Karen Mitchell. Her mother was just brought into the ambulance you're blocking. The words hit Sarah like a thunderclap, her mind racing as confusion floods in. Wait, what? She glances back at Karen, whose face has suddenly gone pale as she processes the information. Yes, the officer continues, urgency creeping into her voice. We just received word that Mrs. Mitchell collapsed at home and is being transported for medical attention. You might want to let those paramedics through. Time seems to freeze for Sarah as she absorbs this shocking twist. The woman standing before her, so determined to enforce rules, now stands on the brink of a personal crisis that mirrors her own. Sarah can hardly believe what she's hearing. She looks back at Karen, who is now visibly shaken, her previous composure crumbling. Karen. Sarah calls out, the anger that once surged within her now replaced by a wave of empathy. Your mother is in the ambulance? They need to get through. Karen's eyes widen in disbelief as the reality sinks in, and for the first time, she seems vulnerable. The self-righteousness that had anchored her position begins to falter as panic sets in. I didn't know. Karen stammers, glancing from Sarah to the paramedics with desperation in her eyes. I didn't know it was my mother. In that instant, everything shifts. The confrontation that felt so monumental just moments ago now pales against the urgency of their shared reality. Sarah watches as Karen's composure crumbles further, realizing they are no longer adversaries but two women facing an unforeseen crisis together. All thoughts of rules and regulations fade away as they unite over something far more significant, the health and safety of their mothers. As the realization sinks in, Karen's expression shifts from defiance to sheer shock. Her eyes widen, and for a moment she is frozen, the weight of the revelation crashing over her like a tidal wave. The words Sarah had just spoken reverberate in her mind. Your mother is in the ambulance. Suddenly, her carefully constructed facade of authority crumbles, revealing the vulnerability beneath. Wait, my mother? Karen stammers, her voice barely above a whisper. She glances from Sarah to the paramedics, her heart racing as panic begins to set in. The rigid stance she had maintained slips away, and she takes an involuntary step back, her hands falling limply at her sides. The reality of the situation dawns on her like a harsh light. All at once, the significance of maintaining HOA regulations pales in comparison to the life-or-death urgency they are now both facing. No longer is she simply an enforcer of rules, she is now part of a shared struggle, a daughter desperately hoping for her mother's safety. Please, Karen breathes, her voice trembling as she looks at the paramedics. You need to get to my mom. Let them through. Her previous stubbornness dissolves into frantic urgency as she gestures wildly toward the ambulance. There's no room for pride anymore, all that matters is ensuring that help reaches her mother without delay. Sarah watches this transformation unfold before her eyes. The woman who had been so resolute moments ago is now filled with fear and regret. Karen's hands shake slightly as she steps aside, finally comprehending the gravity of what she had been blocking. There's a raw honesty in her expression that hadn't existed before, a mixture of fear for her own mother and humility that comes from recognizing how quickly priorities can shift. As the paramedics spring into action, rushing past Karen toward the ambulance, Sarah feels a profound sense of connection with the woman who had been her adversary just minutes ago. In this moment of crisis, they are united by a common bond, their love for their mothers and their desperate hope for their safety. The tension from earlier evaporates in light of this shared reality as they both stand on the precipice of uncertainty together, realizing how fragile life can truly be. As the paramedics rush past her, Karen stands frozen, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. The gravity of her earlier actions crashes down like a heavy weight on her chest. She watches helplessly as they scramble toward the ambulance, urgency etched on their faces. Her heart races and guilt floods through her veins. How could she have been so blind? In her stubborn pursuit of order, she had put her own mother at risk. The realization gnaws at her insides, each second dragging painfully as she wrestles with her conscience. Memories flood back, her mother's laughter, the warmth of their shared moments, and the countless times she had been there for her. Yet here she was, prioritizing rules over the well-being of the very person who had always cared for her. Why didn't I think? She whispers to herself, voice trembling as regret envelopes her like a suffocating shroud. The thought of her mother lying vulnerable in the ambulance fills her with dread. What if it's too late? The questions torment her. How could she have let HOA regulations stand in the way of helping someone in need? Karen's mind races as she recalls all the times she had enforced the rules without considering the human element behind them. Her self-righteousness feels like a heavy chain dragging her down. I was just trying to protect our neighborhood, she tries to convince herself, but the excuse rings hollow in light of what's happening now. As she watches the paramedics load her mother into the ambulance, a wave of shame washes over her. She feels small and insignificant, haunted by the understanding that she had contributed to this situation through her unwavering adherence to rules that now seem trivial. What have I done? She murmurs, tears welling in her eyes. In that moment of clarity, Karen understands that it's not just about maintaining order, it's about compassion and community, qualities she had neglected in favor of control. As she steps forward, desperate to make amends, Karen knows that this experience will change how she views her role not only as an HOA president but also as a daughter. With a newfound urgency, she approaches the paramedics, ready to offer any help they need and hoping it isn't too late to save the woman who has always been there for her. As the reality of her actions sinks in, Karen's heart races. She watches the paramedics work frantically to stabilize her mother, and a wave of determination washes over her. The rigid rules she once clung to now feel utterly meaningless in the face of her mother's health crisis. With renewed purpose, Karen takes a deep breath and steps forward, ready to make things right. "Excuse me," she calls out, her voice shaky but resolute. The paramedics turn briefly, their expressions a mix of confusion and urgency. "I'm so sorry for blocking the ambulance. I didn't realize. I didn't know it was my mother." Her voice cracks as she speaks, sincerity pouring out of her. One of the paramedics nods, acknowledging her apology but not pausing in their work. "We need to focus on getting her stabilized first," he replies, his tone practical yet understanding. Karen feels a rush of guilt at their unwavering dedication, realizing how misplaced her priorities had been. She takes another step closer. Please, let me help. I can get you anything you need from the house. Just tell me what to do." Her urgency is palpable as she offers herself as a resource rather than a hindrance. Sarah watches this transformation in Karen with a mixture of astonishment and cautious hope. The woman who had once stood rigidly in defense of rules is now genuinely seeking to contribute to the well-being of her community that includes Sarah and her mother. With a nod from the paramedics, Karen rushes into the house, grabbing anything that might be useful, a list of her mother's medications, a warm blanket, even water for the paramedics. As she fumbles through drawers and cabinets, she reflects on how community means being there for one another, especially in times of crisis. Emerging with an armful of items, she hands them to the paramedics with an earnest plea, "Please take these to my mom. I want to do everything I can." Her eyes meet Sarah's for a moment, and in that shared glance lies an unspoken understanding. They are both fighting for their mother's lives. "I'm so sorry for my behavior earlier," Karen says softly to Sarah, guilt etched across her face. "I let my pride get in the way. I see now that we're all in this together." In that moment, something shifts between them, a fragile bond forged through shared fear and newfound respect as they unite in their desire to see their loved ones recover. As the ambulance pulls away, sirens wailing into the distance, a profound silence envelopes the neighborhood. Sarah and Karen stand side by side, both shaken but united by the harrowing experience they've just endured. The air is thick with emotions, relief, fear, but most importantly, a newfound understanding of one another. In the following days, Karen's mother receives the medical attention she desperately needed. Thankfully, she is stabilized and on the road to recovery. This news brings a sense of relief to both women, yet it also prompts a deeper reflection on what transpired that fateful day. Karen spends her evenings pondering how her rigid adherence to rules clouded her judgment and nearly cost her mother's life. She realizes that her role as HOA president should extend beyond enforcing regulations. It should include fostering a sense of community and compassion among neighbors. Inspired by this revelation, Karen decides to call a neighborhood meeting not to discuss rules or penalties but to create an open forum for sharing concerns and building connections. Meanwhile, Sarah reflects on her own journey through the crisis. Initially consumed by frustration and anger towards Karen, she discovers that compassion can emerge even from conflict. The experience taught her that vulnerability can bridge gaps between people who seem worlds apart. She reaches out to Karen after receiving the good news about their mothers, suggesting they collaborate on community efforts to support one another. As they meet over coffee in the days that follow, both women find themselves laughing and sharing stories about their families. The tension that once defined their relationship has transformed into a bond forged through mutual struggle and understanding. They talk about how important it is to look beyond rules and see the human element in every situation. The incident becomes a catalyst for change in their neighborhood. Residents come together to support one another in times of need, fostering an environment where compassion takes precedence over regulations. Karen's transformation from an unyielding enforcer to a caring neighbor sets a new tone for the community. In the end, both Sarah and Karen walk away from this experience with valuable lessons, that compassion can unite even the most unlikely of allies and that sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us of what truly matters, each other. In the weeks following the incident, the ripple effects of that fateful day begin to reshape the neighborhood. The once rigid atmosphere, dominated by strict adherence to HOA rules, gives way to a newfound sense of community and collaboration among residents. Karen's transformation inspires others, leading to discussions about how they can collectively foster a more compassionate environment. Recognizing that their previous policies often prioritized order over humanity, the HOA board, under Karen's leadership, convenes to reevaluate their bylaws. They decide to implement changes that emphasize community welfare, creating guidelines that allow for flexibility in emergencies. New policies are drafted, highlighting the importance of compassion and understanding in their neighborhood practices. The rules now include provisions for emergency situations, ensuring that residents can prioritize life over regulations without fear of retribution. The neighborhood also establishes an open-door policy for residents to voice concerns and share experiences, creating a platform where everyone feels heard and valued. Monthly community meetings become a space not only for discussing neighborhood issues but also for celebrating each other's successes and supporting one another during difficult times. These changes lead to a remarkable shift in relationships among neighbors. Residents who previously kept to themselves begin to connect more deeply, forming friendships that extend beyond casual greetings. Sarah and Karen start organizing community events aimed at building camaraderie and trust, picnics in the park, potluck dinners, and volunteer opportunities that bring everyone together. As people gather, stories are shared of struggles, triumphs, and the lessons learned from that harrowing day. Bonds are forged through shared laughter and collective support, transforming the neighborhood into a close-knit community where compassion reigns supreme. Word spreads about the positive changes in this once strict HOA, attracting new families looking for a place where kindness prevails over rigidity. The neighborhood evolves into a model of unity and understanding, with residents taking pride in their ability to support one another through thick and thin. In this vibrant new atmosphere, Karen finds herself deeply fulfilled as she witnesses her neighbors come together in ways she had never imagined possible. The experience not only alters her perspective but also strengthens her commitment to being a leader who champions both rules and humanity. The community emerges from its past with a renewed spirit, an enduring reminder of how one crisis can lead to transformations that benefit everyone involved. As the neighborhood settles into its new rhythm, the lessons learned from that fateful day linger in the hearts of its residents. The incident that unfolded, a tension-filled standoff between Karen and Sarah, transformed not just a single moment but the very essence of community life. It serves as a potent reminder of how crises can reveal true character, pushing individuals to confront their beliefs and actions in ways they never anticipated. In the days following the ambulance incident, both Sarah and Karen reflect on their experiences. They realize that moments of crisis often strip away the facades people wear, exposing vulnerabilities and awakening empathy. The rigid structures that once defined their interactions now feel inadequate next to the urgent need for compassion and support. Karen's journey from an uncompromising enforcer of rules to a caring neighbor illustrates the power of humility and understanding. It highlights how one's perspective can shift dramatically when faced with personal stakes, when the well-being of loved ones is on the line. She learns that true leadership involves being responsive to the needs of the community rather than simply adhering to regulations. Sarah's experience also deepens her understanding of empathy. Her initial anger toward Karen evolves into compassion, allowing her to see Karen not just as an antagonist but as a fellow human being grappling with her own fears and challenges. This transformation fosters a newfound appreciation for connection, urging her to reach out and extend kindness, even to those she once viewed as obstacles. The neighborhood's evolution embodies the spirit of cooperation, showcasing how looking beyond rules can foster a supportive environment where everyone thrives. Residents begin to prioritize relationships over rigid adherence to policies, recognizing that life is unpredictable and often requires flexibility and grace. As they gather for community events, laughter replaces tension and shared experiences strengthen bonds. The neighborhood stands as a testament to the idea that when people come together in times of need, when they choose understanding over judgment, they create a tapestry woven with resilience, compassion, and unity. In reflecting on these events, it becomes clear that while rules are essential for structure, it is empathy and kindness that truly bind communities together. The lessons learned resonate far beyond their suburban streets, echoing a timeless truth: in moments of crisis, it is our shared humanity that ultimately defines us.